The billionaire returns home and is shocked to find a single dad security guard, saving her only son. Before we continue with the story, tell us where you're watching from and how old you are, and subscribe to our channel to receive new stories every day that will touch your heart. I hope you enjoy the story. The black limousine glided through the winding roads of Millbrook Hills like a sleek shadow against the amber sunset. Elena Vance pressed her manicured fingers against the cool window, watching familiar landscapes blur past. Landscapes she had deliberately avoided for nearly a decade. The towering oak trees that lined the private road to her family's estate seemed to whisper secrets she wasn't ready to hear, their ancient branches reaching toward the darkening sky like gnarled fingers beckoning her home. "Mummy, are we there yet?" Leo's small voice pierced through her contemplation. At 8 years old, her son possessed the restless energy of a caged bird, his dark hair, so much like her late husband's, falling across his forehead as he bounced impatiently in his seat. Elena turned to study her child, noting the shadows under his eyes that matched her own. The expensive boarding school had called again last week, their concerned voices echoing through her Manhattan penthouse about Leo's behavioral issues and emotional outbursts. The guilt that had been gnawing at her insides for months intensified as she looked at him now, seeing not just her son, but a reflection of her own fractured soul. "Almost, sweetheart," she murmured, her voice carrying the weight of unspoken apologies. "We're going to live in Grandma's house now. Remember the pictures I showed you?" Leo's eyes brightened momentarily before clouding over again. "The big, scary house with all the rooms?" Elena's chest tightened. Even at his young age, Leo seemed to sense the darkness that clung to the Vance estate like morning fog. The mansion had been empty since her mother's death 3 years ago, a death that Elena still blamed herself for, though she'd never spoken those words aloud. As they rounded the final curve, the Vance estate materialized before them like something from a Gothic novel. The 3-story Victorian mansion stood majestically against the backdrop of rolling hills, its numerous windows reflecting the dying light like watchful eyes. Ivy crawled up the stone walls, and the elaborate gardens, once her mother's pride and joy, now grew wild and untamed, beautiful in their abandonment, yet somehow melancholic. The limousine crunched to a halt on the circular gravel driveway, and Elena felt her breath catch in her throat. Standing at attention near the front steps was a man she didn't recognize, tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of posture that spoke of military training. His dark hair was cropped short, and even from a distance she could see the alert way his steel-grey eyes surveyed their arrival. "Ma'am, that would be the new head of security you requested," her assistant Patricia said from the front passenger seat, consulting her ever-present tablet. "Liam Carter, former Army Ranger, impeccable references, and he comes highly recommended by the security firm." Elena nodded curtly, though something about the man's presence unsettled her. Perhaps it was the way he stood so confidently on her family's property, or maybe it was the gentle way his expression softened when Leo bounded out of the car ahead of her. Whatever it was, she filed the feeling away for later examination. "Mr. Carter," she said briskly as she emerged from the vehicle, her designer heels clicking against the gravel, "I trust you've been briefed on our security requirements." Liam stepped forward, his movements controlled and precise. Up close, Elena could see the small scar above his left eyebrow, and the way his eyes seemed to take in everything. Her defensive posture, Leo's excited exploration of the fountain, the way her hands trembled slightly despite her composed facade. "Yes, ma'am." "Mrs. Vance, welcome home." His voice was deep, steady, with just a hint of warmth that she found unexpectedly comforting. "I've completed a full security assessment of the property. There are some areas that need immediate attention, but overall, the estate is secure." "Good." Elena's response was clipped, professional. She had learned long ago that maintaining distance with employees was essential. "I assume you have the updated access codes and patrol schedules ready for review." "Of course." Liam handed her a leather folder, their fingers brushing briefly in the exchange. The contact was electric, unexpected, and Elena pulled her hand back as if she'd been burned. If Liam noticed her reaction, he was professional enough not to show it. "Wow, look at this place." Leo's voice echoed across the courtyard as he ran toward the elaborate fountain at the center of the driveway. The cherub statue at its peak had weathered over the years, but water still cascaded down its tiers in a soothing rhythm. Elena watched her son with a mixture of relief and apprehension. It was the first genuine excitement she'd seen from him in months, but the mansion held so many dangers, so many memories that could hurt them both. "Leo, stay close," she called out, her voice sharper than she intended. Liam glanced between mother and son, his expression thoughtful. "If I may, Mrs. Vance, I have a daughter about Leo's age. Kids need space to explore, especially after a big move. I could show him around the safer areas of the property tomorrow if you'd like." The suggestion hit Elena like a physical blow. The casual mention of his daughter reminded her painfully of everything Leo was missing: a father's guidance, a complete family, the kind of stability she'd never been able to provide. Her walls went up immediately, higher and stronger than before. "That won't be necessary, Mr. Carter. Leo is my responsibility, and I prefer to handle his needs personally." The ice in her voice could have frozen the fountain solid. "Your job is security, nothing more." Something flickered in Liam's eyes. Disappointment, perhaps, or understanding. He simply nodded. "Of course, Ma'am. I'll have the night patrol begin at 8 p.m. The main security office is in the East Wing, and I'll be available if you need anything." As Liam walked away, his boots crunching softly on the gravel, Elena felt an unexpected pang of regret. But she pushed it down, focusing instead on the overwhelming task ahead of her, returning to the place where her mother had died, where every room held memories she'd spent years trying to forget. The interior of the mansion embraced them with the scent of old wood and faded roses. Dust motes danced in the shafts of evening light that streamed through the tall windows, and Elena could almost hear her mother's laughter echoing from the parlor where they used to have their afternoon tea. "Mrs. Vance?" Patricia's voice broke through her reverie. "I've arranged for the cleaning service to arrive tomorrow morning, and the kitchen staff will begin next week. Will you need anything else tonight?" Elena looked around at the sheeted furniture and the portrait of her mother that still hung prominently in the front hall. Margaret Vance's painted eyes seemed to follow her, filled with the same disappointment that had haunted their last conversation. "No, Patricia, you can take the rest of the evening off. Leo and I will manage." After Patricia left, the mansion settled into an expectant silence. Leo had found his way to the grand staircase and was running his small hands along the polished banister, his earlier excitement now replaced by a kind of awed quiet. "Mommy, can I see my room?" he asked, his voice smaller now in the vastness of the space. "Of course, darling." Elena took his hand, noting how cold her own fingers felt against his warm palm. "It's on the second floor, overlooking the garden." They climbed the stairs together, their footsteps muffled by the thick runner carpet. The hallway stretched before them, lined with family portraits that Elena tried not to look at too closely. At the end of the hall, she pushed open the door to what had once been her own childhood bedroom. The room had been prepared according to her specifications: fresh paint in a warm blue, new furniture scaled for a child, and toys carefully arranged to look welcoming but not overwhelming. But it was the view from the window that made Elena's breath catch. The room looked directly out onto the swimming pool area where her mother had... "It's huge!" Leo exclaimed, running to jump on the bed. "And I can see the whole backyard from here." Eleanor forced a smile, though her heart was racing. Do you like it, sweetheart? I guess so. Leo's enthusiasm dimmed slightly. But it's kind of lonely, isn't it? Back home I could hear Mrs. Patterson's dog barking next door and the street sounds. Here it's so quiet. The word hung between them, heavy with unspoken truth. Eleanor sat on the edge of the bed, pulling Leo close to her. He smelled like the airplane and expensive children's soap, but underneath was that indefinable scent that was purely her son, innocent and trusting and heartbreakingly vulnerable. It's an adjustment for both of us, she said softly, stroking his hair. But we'll make new memories here, good ones. Leo looked up at her with eyes that seemed far too old for his 8 years. Mommy, why did we really come here? And don't say it's because of school again. I know that's not the whole truth. Elena felt her carefully constructed composure crack slightly. How could she explain to an 8-year-old that she'd brought him here because she was drowning in guilt and work and the impossible task of being both mother and father to him? How could she tell him that every report from his school felt like a condemnation of her failures as a parent? Sometimes, she said carefully, we need to go back to where we came from to figure out where we're going. It wasn't really an answer, and they both knew it, but Leo seemed to accept it for now. He yawned, the long day finally catching up with him, and Elena helped him get ready for bed. As she tucked him in, he grabbed her hand. Mommy, that man outside, the security guard, he seems nice. His eyes were kind, like Daddy's used to be. Elena's throat closed up. Leo rarely mentioned his father anymore, not since the funeral 2 years ago. Hearing him make the comparison between David and Liam sent a shock of unexpected emotion through her. Go to sleep, sweetheart, she whispered, kissing his forehead. Everything will look better in the morning. But as she made her way downstairs to the study that had been her father's domain, Elena wasn't sure she believed her own words. The mansion felt alive around her, full of whispers and memories, and the weight of expectations she wasn't sure she could meet. She poured herself a glass of wine from the bottle Patricia had left on the sideboard and walked to the window that looked out over the grounds. In the distance, she could see a light in what must be Liam's quarters above the old carriage house. The sight of it was oddly comforting, a reminder that she and Leo weren't entirely alone in this vast, echoing space. As if summoned by her thoughts, Liam appeared on the path below, making his evening rounds. He moved with the fluid grace of someone accustomed to danger, his attention focused on the shadows and corners where threats might hide. Elena found herself watching him longer than was appropriate, noting the way the security lights caught the strong line of his jaw and the careful way he checked each door and window. When he paused and looked up at the study window, Eleanor stepped back quickly, her cheeks burning with embarrassment at being caught observing him, but not before she saw something in his expression that made her pulse quicken, a mix of concern and understanding that she hadn't seen directed at her in years. That night, Elena lay awake in her mother's old bedroom, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the house settling around her. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of wind through the trees seemed magnified in the darkness. She'd chosen her mother's room deliberately, as a form of penance, but now she wondered if it had been a mistake. At some point past midnight, she heard Leo crying. The sound pierced through the walls and her own exhaustion, sending her running down the hallway in her silk nightgown and bare feet. She found him sitting up in bed, his face streaked with tears and his small body shaking with sobs. "Leo, baby, what's wrong?" She pulled him into her arms, feeling his heartbeat racing against her chest. "I had a nightmare," he gasped between sobs. "There were monsters in the shadows, and they were trying to take you away like they took Daddy." Elena's heart broke a little more. "Oh, sweetheart, there are no monsters here. Mommy's not going anywhere, I promise." "But you're always going somewhere," Leo said with the brutal honesty of childhood. "You go to work and meetings and trips, and I'm always with nannies and teachers and people who aren't you." The truth of it hit Elena like a slap. In the 2 years since David's death, she'd thrown herself into work with manic intensity, telling herself it was to provide for Leo's future. But now she realized she'd been running from grief, from responsibility, from the terrifying vulnerability of being someone's entire world. "You're right," she whispered against his hair. "I haven't been here the way I should have been, but that's going to change, I promise." "Really? Really?" Elena pulled back to look at him, this beautiful boy who was half her and half the man she'd lost. "We're going to figure this out together, okay?" Leo nodded, his sobs subsiding into hiccups. "Can you stay until I fall asleep?" "Of course." Elena settled into the chair beside his bed, watching as his breathing gradually evened out and his small fist uncurled from where it had been clutching her nightgown. In the dim light from the hallway, he looked so young, so innocent, so completely dependent on her to keep him safe. The weight of that responsibility was both terrifying and precious. For the first time in years, Elena found herself praying, not to any particular deity, but to the universe in general, that she would be strong enough, wise enough, present enough to be the mother Leo deserved. Outside, she could hear the distant sound of Liam's boots on the gravel as he made his patrol rounds. The steady rhythm was oddly soothing, a reminder that someone was watching over them, keeping the real monsters at bay while she battled the ones inside her heart. The next morning dawned grey and drizzly, with low clouds hanging over the hills like a soft blanket. Elena woke to the sound of voices outside, one adult, one child, both laughing with the kind of easy joy she couldn't remember experiencing in years. Wrapping a silk robe around herself, she moved to the window and looked down into the courtyard. Leo was there, still in his pajamas, crouched beside the fountain with Liam. They appeared to be feeding breadcrumbs to a family of ducks that had wandered up from the pond at the edge of the property. "That one's the daddy," Leo was saying, pointing to the largest mallard. "And that's the mommy, and those are their babies." Liam's voice carried clearly in the morning air. "How can you tell which is which?" "The daddy has the pretty green head, and he swims in front to make sure it's safe for his family. Just like my daddy used to do." There was no sadness in Leo's voice, just matter-of-fact acceptance that made Elena's chest tight. "Your daddy sounds like he was a good man," Liam said gently. "He was. Mommy says he's watching over us from heaven now, but sometimes I wish he could watch over us from the kitchen table instead. You know?" Liam's laugh was warm and understanding. "I know exactly what you mean, buddy." Elena gripped the windowsill, torn between gratitude that someone was connecting with her son and resentment that it wasn't her down there, sharing that moment of simple happiness. When had she become so removed from Leo's world that a stranger could reach him more easily than she could? She was still watching when Liam suddenly looked up at her window. Their eyes met across the distance, and Elena felt that same electric jolt she'd experienced the day before. This time, she didn't look away immediately. Instead, she found herself studying his face, noting the gentleness in his expression as he spoke to Leo and the way his mouth quirked up slightly at one corner when he was amused. Liam raised his hand in a small wave, and Elena realized she was standing at the window in her nightgown, her hair loose around her shoulders, probably looking like some kind of gothic heroine from a romance novel. Heat flooded her cheeks as she stepped back, but not before she caught the appreciative look that flickered across Liam's features. By the time she'd showered and dressed in her usual armor of designer clothing and perfect makeup, Leo had come inside, chattering excitedly about the ducks and the really cool guy who knew all about animals and had promised to show him where the rabbits liked to hide in the garden. "Leo, you shouldn't bother Mr. Carter," Elena said, as she poured coffee from the pot Patricia had prepared. "He has important work to do." "He said it wasn't a bother," Leo replied, climbing onto one of the tall stools at the kitchen island. He said he likes kids because they notice things that adults miss. Elena paused in her coffee pouring. What kinds of things? Like how the fountain sounds different when it's going to rain, and the way the roses smell stronger in the evening. He said his daughter taught him to pay attention to stuff like that. His daughter? Elena tried to keep her voice casual, but she found herself unexpectedly curious about Liam's family situation. Uh-huh. Her name is Sophie, and she's 9. She lives with her mom most of the time, but she visits Mr. Liam on weekends. He showed me a picture. She has really pretty red hair and freckles. Elena felt an odd twist of emotion at the mention of Liam's ex-wife. It was none of her business, of course, but she found herself wondering what kind of woman had captured the attention of the serious, controlled man who now patrolled her property. Mrs. Vance? Patricia's voice interrupted her thoughts. I have the cleaning crew ready to start in the East Wing, and the landscapers are here to discuss the garden restoration. Also, there's a reporter from the Business Journal who'd like to schedule an interview about your return to Millbrook Hills. Elena sighed, feeling the familiar weight of obligations settling on her shoulders. Tell the reporter, I'm not ready to give interviews yet. Schedule the landscaper meeting for this afternoon, and make sure the cleaning crew understands that my mother's personal effects in the master bedroom are not to be touched. Of course. Also, Mr. Carter asked if he could speak with you about some security upgrades he'd like to implement. Fine. Tell him I'll meet with him in the study at 10. Deal. As Patricia bustled off to handle the day's arrangements, Elena looked at Leo, who was making elaborate patterns in his cereal with his spoon, seemingly lost in thought. What are you thinking about, sweetheart? Leo looked up at her with those 2 serious eyes. Do you think we'll be happy here, Mommy? The question caught Elena off guard with its simplicity and its complexity. I hope so, baby. I really hope so. But as she said it, Elena realized she wasn't even sure what happiness would look like for them anymore. For so long, her definition of success had been tied to business achievements and financial milestones. The idea of simple contentment, the kind she'd glimpsed in Leo's face as he fed the ducks, seemed almost foreign. At exactly 10 o'clock, Liam knocked on the study door. Elena looked up from the financial report she'd been reviewing, noting the way he filled the doorframe and how his presence seemed to change the energy of the room. Mr. Carter, come in. Please, have a seat. Liam settled into the chair across from her desk. His posture relaxed but alert. He'd changed from his casual morning clothes into his professional security uniform, and Elena found herself missing the glimpse of the more informal man she'd observed earlier. I've completed my full assessment of the property, he began, pulling out a tablet and a manila folder. Overall, the bones of the security system are solid, but there are some areas that need immediate attention. For the next 20 minutes, they discussed motion sensors, camera placements, and perimeter alarms. Elena found herself impressed by Liam's thoroughness and professionalism, but also distracted by the way his hands moved as he explained the technical details and the slight roughness in his voice that suggested he'd spent years giving orders in less comfortable circumstances. There's one other thing, Liam said as they wrapped up the official discussion. I noticed some unusual activity around the property perimeter yesterday evening. Probably nothing, but I want to increase the patrol frequency until we're certain. Elena felt a chill of unease. What kind of unusual activity? Someone was parked on the access road for about an hour, just watching the house. When I approached, they drove off. Could have been a curious local or a reporter, but I'd rather be cautious. The mention of reporters made Elena's stomach clench. She'd known that returning to Millbrook Hills would attract attention, but she'd hoped for a few weeks of peace before the media circus began. I'll handle any press inquiries, she said firmly, but I appreciate you keeping me informed. Liam nodded, then hesitated as if he wanted to say something more. Finally, he spoke. Mrs. Vance, I hope you don't mind that I spoke with Leo this morning. He seemed a little lonely, and I thought—" "Mr. Carter," Elena interrupted, her voice sharper than she intended. "While I appreciate your concern, Leo's emotional well-being is my responsibility. I hired you to secure the property, not to befriend my son." Something shuddered in Liam's expression, and Elena immediately regretted her harsh tone, but the words were already out there, hanging between them like a wall. "Of course," Liam said quietly. "I apologize if I overstepped." After he left, Elena sat alone in the study, staring at the security reports without really seeing them. She could hear Leo's laughter drifting in from the garden, where he was apparently helping the landscapers plant new rose bushes. The sound should have made her happy, but instead it filled her with a complex mix of relief and resentment. Why was it so easy for Leo to connect with others, while she felt like she was speaking a foreign language whenever she tried to reach him? And why did the thought of Liam's gentle understanding make her feel both grateful and threatened? That afternoon, while Leo napped and the cleaning crew worked on the upper floors, Elena found herself walking through the mansion's many rooms, reacquainting herself with the space that had shaped her childhood. In the conservatory, she found her mother's piano, the keys dusty but still in tune. Margaret Vance had been an accomplished pianist, and some of Elena's happiest memories were of sitting beside her mother on the piano bench, trying to follow along as those elegant fingers danced across the keys. Elena pressed middle C, and the note rang out clear and pure in the empty room. Almost without conscious thought, she began to play one of the simple pieces her mother had taught her, a gentle melody in a minor key that had always made her think of rain on windows and safe afternoons inside. She was so absorbed in the music that she didn't hear the soft footsteps behind her until Leo's small arms wrapped around her waist from behind. "That's pretty, Mommy. I didn't know you could play piano." Elena's hands stilled on the keys. "Your grandmother taught me when I was about your age. Will you teach me?" The request was so simple, so hopeful, that Elena felt tears prick at her eyes. When was the last time Leo had asked her for anything that didn't involve buying something or going somewhere? "Would you like that?" "Yes!" Leo scrambled up onto the bench beside her, his small fingers immediately reaching for the keys. The sound he produced was more noise than music, but his face was bright with excitement. For the next hour, they sat together at the piano, Elena guiding Leo's hands to simple chords and melodies. It was the most relaxed she'd felt since arriving at the estate, and the most connected to her son she'd felt in months. They were in the middle of a very off-key version of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star when Elena noticed Liam standing in the doorway, apparently on his way to check the conservatory's security sensors. He started to back away when he saw them, but Leo spotted him first. "Mr. Liam, come listen to me play piano. Mommy's teaching me." Liam looked uncertain, his eyes moving from Leo's excited face to Eleanor's guarded expression. "I don't want to interrupt." "You're not interrupting," Elena heard herself say, surprising them both. "Leo's quite proud of his progress." Liam stepped into the room, and Elena was acutely aware of his presence as Leo launched into another enthusiastic but wildly inaccurate rendition of the children's song. When Leo finished, Liam applauded with genuine appreciation. "That was excellent, Leo. You're a natural musician." Leo beamed. "Do you play any instruments, Mr. Liam?" "I play guitar a little. Nothing fancy, just campfire songs mostly." "Could you play something for us?" Leo asked with the unfiltered enthusiasm that Elena both envied and found exhausting. Liam glanced at Elena, clearly asking permission. After a moment's hesitation, she nodded. "If you'd like to, that would be nice." 20 minutes later, Liam returned with an acoustic guitar that looked well-loved and frequently played. He settled into one of the conservatory's wicker chairs and began to tune the strings, his movements sure and practiced. "Any requests?" he asked, looking primarily at Leo but including Elena in the question. Something happy, Leo said immediately. Liam's fingers found the opening chords of Here Comes the Sun, and his voice, when he began to sing, was a warm baritone that seemed to fill the conservatory with golden light. Elena found herself relaxing despite her best efforts to maintain her emotional distance, drawn in by the simple beauty of the moment. Leo was transfixed, his small body swaying slightly with the music, and Elena couldn't help but smile at his obvious delight. When Liam finished the song, the conservatory fell into a comfortable silence, broken only by the gentle rain that had begun to fall against the windows. "That was beautiful," Elena said softly, meaning it. Liam's eyes met hers, and for a moment, the careful barriers they'd both constructed seemed to dissolve. "Music has a way of making everything else fade away for a while," he said. "Sometimes that's exactly what we need." Elena had the uncomfortable feeling that he was talking about more than just the song, and she looked away first, busying herself with straightening the sheet music on the piano. "Mr. Liam," Leo said suddenly, "do you think my daddy can hear music in heaven?" The question hung in the air, heavy with the kind of innocent faith that adults had long since lost. Elena felt her throat close up, not sure how to answer without either lying to her son or destroying his hope. Liam set his guitar aside and leaned forward slightly, his expression gentle but serious. "I think," he said carefully, "that love doesn't end just because someone goes away. So if your daddy loved music when he was here, then maybe music is one of the ways you can still feel close to him." It was exactly the right thing to say, honest without being crushing, comforting without being false. Elena felt a rush of gratitude toward this man who seemed to understand her son in ways she was still learning. "I think Daddy would have liked your guitar playing," Leo said, with the matter-of-fact acceptance that children brought to life's biggest questions. "I'm honored you think so, buddy." The rain was falling harder now, drumming against the conservatory's glass walls and creating a cozy cocoon around the three of them. Elena found herself reluctant to break the spell, to return to the roles of employer and employee that seemed increasingly artificial. "I should check the weather reports," Liam said finally, rising from his chair. "Heavy rain can affect some of the outdoor senses." As he started to leave, guitar in hand, Elena called out almost without thinking, "Mr. Carter, thank you. For the music, I mean. It's been a long time since this house has heard anything so beautiful." Liam paused in the doorway, and when he looked back at her, Elena saw something in his expression that made her pulse quicken, a warmth and understanding that she hadn't expected and wasn't sure she was ready for. "Music makes any house feel more like a home," he said simply. "Maybe that's what this place needs." After he left, Elena and Leo remained in the conservatory, listening to the rain and occasionally picking out melodies on the piano. But Elena's thoughts kept drifting to Liam's words, and the way his presence had transformed the atmosphere of the room from melancholy to something approaching peace. That evening, after Leo had gone to bed, Elena found herself walking the halls of the mansion, reacquainting herself with rooms she'd avoided thinking about for years. In her mother's bedroom, she finally approached the vanity where Margaret Vance had performed her nightly ritual of brushing her silver hair exactly 100 times before bed. Elena picked up the antique silver brush, its weight familiar in her palm, and caught sight of herself in the mirror. She looked tired, she realized, and older than her 32 years. When had the lines around her eyes become so pronounced? When had her smile become so forced and infrequent? "You're not happy, are you, darling?" Eleanor spun around, her heart racing, but the room was empty. For a moment, she could have sworn she'd heard her mother's voice. Gentle but concerned, the way Margaret had sounded during their last conversation before Eleanor had stormed out, angry about some long-forgotten disagreement. Shaking her head at her own imagination, Eleanor was about to leave when she noticed something odd about the vanity's mirror. There seemed to be a gap between the glass and the frame, as if the mirror wasn't quite flush against the back. Curious, she pressed against the glass and it shifted slightly. With careful fingers, Elena managed to work the mirror free, revealing a hidden compartment behind it. Inside was a leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed with age, and Elena's breath caught as she recognized her mother's elegant handwriting on the cover. For Elena, when she's ready to understand. Elena sank onto the vanity stool, journal trembling in her hands. She'd thought she'd known everything about her mother, but apparently Margaret Vance had kept secrets of her own. With a mixture of anticipation and dread, Eleanor opened to the first page. "My dearest Elena," the entry began, dated just 6 months before Margaret's death. "If you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you've finally come home. I hope you can forgive an old woman's dramatics, but there are things you need to know. Things I couldn't tell you while I was alive because you weren't ready to hear them." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears as she read her mother's words, written in the careful script she remembered from birthday cards and grocery lists. Margaret wrote about her own struggles as a young mother, about the loneliness of being married to a man who was more in love with his business than his family, and about the mistakes she'd made in trying to prepare Elena for a world that demanded strength above all else. "I taught you to build walls, my dear one passage read, because I thought they would protect you. But I realize now that I may have taught you too well. Walls that keep out pain also keep out love, and I fear I've left you isolated in a fortress of your own making." Elena had to stop reading, overwhelmed by the accuracy of her mother's words. Had Margaret really understood her so well, even when Elena had felt like they were speaking different languages? She was about to continue when she heard voices outside, Liam speaking quietly to someone, his tone alert and professional. Elena moved to the window and peered out through the curtains. Liam was standing near the front gate, talking to 2 men she didn't recognize. Even from a distance, she could see the tension in his posture. Eleanor slipped downstairs and out the side door, moving carefully through the garden shadows until she could hear the conversation. "Told you before, there's nothing to see here," Liam was saying, his voice calm but firm. "This is private property, and the family has requested privacy." Come on, Carter," one of the men replied, and Elena caught a glimpse of a camera slung around his neck. "We just want a few pictures." Elena Vance returning to the family estate after all these years. That's news. People are curious about why she's really here. "What people want and what they're entitled to are 2 different things," Liam responded. "I'm going to have to ask you to leave now." "You can't keep us off the public road," the second man protested. "No, but I can call the sheriff if you're harassing the residents. Your choice." Elena watched as the 2 men reluctantly retreated to their car, muttering complaints about property rights and freedom of the press. Only after their taillights had disappeared down the hill did Liam relax his stance. Elena was about to return to the house when Liam turned and looked directly at the spot where she was hidden among the rose bushes. In the moonlight, his expression was unreadable, but she had the uncomfortable feeling that he'd known she was there all along. "Coast is clear, Mrs. Vance," he said quietly. "Though you might want to invest in darker pajamas if you plan to make a habit of midnight reconnaissance." Elena looked down at her white silk nightgown, which was practically glowing in the moonlight, and felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. She stepped out of the shadows, trying to maintain what dignity she could while standing in her garden, in her nightclothes. "I heard voices," she said, lifting her chin defensively. "I wanted to make sure Leo was safe." "He's perfectly safe," Liam assured her, his tone gentler now. "But you should be more careful. If someone really wanted to harm you or Leo, your first instinct should be to call security, not to investigate personally." "I'm not helpless, Mr. Carter. I never said you were." But courage and recklessness are two different things. You have a son who needs you alive and well. The reminder hit Elena harder than it should have. Those men, who were they? Freelance photographers, probably hoping to sell pictures to the tabloids. Word's gotten out that you're back, and there's speculation about why. Some people think you're in financial trouble, others think you're planning to sell the estate. Elena felt a surge of anger at the invasion of her privacy, followed immediately by worry. Leo doesn't need to deal with photographers camped outside his home. He won't have to, Liam said firmly. I'll make sure of that. The certainty in his voice was oddly comforting, and Elena found herself studying his face in the moonlight. There was something solid about him, something dependable that she hadn't encountered in her high-stakes business world where loyalty was always conditional and trust was a luxury few could afford. "Why?" she asked suddenly. "Why do you care so much? I'm just another client to you." Liam was quiet for a long moment, his gaze moving from her face to the mansion looming behind them, its windows glowing warmly in the darkness. "My daughter lives with her mother most of the time," he said finally. "Every other weekend, I get to be her dad instead of just a visitor in her life. I know what it's like to feel like you're failing the most important person in your world, even when you're doing everything you think is right." The honesty in his words caught Elena off guard. She'd expected a professional response, not this glimpse into his personal pain. "Your ex-wife? She remarried?" Elena asked, then immediately wished she could take the question back. It was none of her business, and far too personal for their professional relationship. 2 years ago, to a good man who loves Sophie like she's his own. Liam's voice was carefully neutral, but Elena caught the edge of loss underneath. "I should be grateful. Sophie has the stable home I couldn't give her after I left the military. But some nights when I'm sitting alone in that apartment above the garage, I wonder if I made all the wrong choices." Elena felt an unexpected kinship with this man, who seemed so composed, so in control of everything around him. "I left Leo with nannies and boarding schools because I thought I was giving him opportunities I never had. But I'm starting to wonder if I was really just running away from being his mother because I was terrified of doing it wrong." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, two people who'd spent years building walls around their hearts, finding unexpected understanding in a moonlit garden. "For what it's worth," Liam said softly, "Leo talks about you constantly. You're his whole world, even when you're not physically present. That has to count for something." "Does it? Sometimes I look at him and see my husband's eyes, and I remember how David could make Leo laugh until he couldn't breathe. I could never do that. I don't know how to be the parent who makes everything feel safe and magical." "Maybe," Liam suggested gently, "you don't have to be magical. Maybe you just have to be present." Elena looked up at him, struck by the simple wisdom in his words. In the moonlight, his face was all angles and shadows, but his eyes were warm with understanding. "I should go inside," she said, suddenly very aware that she was standing in her garden in her nightgown, having the most honest conversation she'd had in years with a man she barely knew. "Probably a good idea. I'll do another perimeter check, make sure our photographer friends don't come back." Eleanor had taken several steps toward the house when she turned back. "Mr. Carter, Liam, thank you for protecting us and for understanding." "Get some sleep, Elena," he said, and the use of her first name sent an unexpected warmth through her chest. "Tomorrow's a new day." Back in her mother's room, Elena returned to the journal with a mixture of anticipation and trepidation. Margaret's next entry was dated several weeks later and contained revelations that made Elena's hands shake. "I've discovered that Marcus is planning something," her mother had written. "Ever since your father fired him, he's been bitter, making threats he thinks I don't hear. Yesterday I found him in the study, going through the financial files. When I confronted him, he said things. Terrible things about what this family owes him, about how he'll make us pay for what we've taken from him. I've tried to tell your father, but he says I'm being paranoid. I pray I'm wrong, but I fear Marcus's resentment runs deeper than any of us imagined. Elena's heart was racing. Marcus Thorne had been her father's business partner for nearly a decade, before some kind of falling out had led to his dismissal. Elena had been away at college during most of the drama, but she remembered the whispered arguments between her parents and the way her father's stress levels had skyrocketed during that period. But what chilled her most was the date of the entry, just 2 months before her mother's death. Margaret had drowned in the swimming pool during what was supposed to be a relaxing evening swim, a tragic accident that had devastated the family. But what if it hadn't been an accident at all? Eleanor's hands were trembling as she turned to the next entry, dated just days before Margaret's death. I can't shake the feeling that someone is watching the house, Margaret had written. Silly, I know, but I keep seeing movements in the shadows, and yesterday I could have sworn someone had been in my room while I was out. I've asked James to check the security system, but he says everything is fine. Maybe I'm just getting old and paranoid, but something feels wrong. If anything happens to me, Elena, look for the evidence I've hidden in my jewelry box. The truth is more complicated than anyone knows. Elena shot to her feet, nearly dropping the journal. Her mother's jewelry box. She'd packed it away years ago, unable to bear looking at the pieces that had been so much a part of Margaret's daily ritual. But if her mother had hidden evidence of some kind? Elena spent the next hour searching through storage boxes in the attic, finally finding the ornate mahogany jewelry box that had sat on her mother's vanity for as long as Elena could remember. Her hands were shaking as she opened it, the familiar melody of Für Elise playing as the tiny ballerina began her eternal dance. At first, Elena found only what she expected: her mother's pearl necklaces, diamond earrings, and the sapphire ring that had been in the Vance family for generations. But then she noticed that the bottom of the box seemed unusually thick. Running her fingers around the edges, she found a hidden catch. The false bottom lifted away to reveal a manila envelope containing photographs, bank statements, and what appeared to be legal documents. Elena's breath caught as she studied the photographs. They showed Marcus Thorne meeting with a woman Elena didn't recognize, exchanging what looked like money and documents. The bank statements were even more damning. They showed regular payments from an offshore account to Marcus, payments that had continued even after his dismissal from Vance Industries. But it was the legal documents that made Elena's blood run cold. They were draft papers for a hostile takeover of Vance Industries, with Marcus listed as a primary shareholder and the mysterious woman identified as Victoria Blackwood, a name Elena recognized with growing horror. Victoria was currently on the board of directors of Vance Industries, one of the few people Elena trusted with the company's strategic decisions. Elena sank into her mother's reading chair, the evidence scattered across her lap, trying to process what she'd discovered. Her mother hadn't been paranoid. She'd been investigating a conspiracy that reached to the highest levels of the family business. And if Margaret had been getting close to exposing them, a soft knock on the bedroom door made Elena jump, her heart hammering in her chest. "Mrs. Vance." Liam's voice was quiet but urgent. "I need to speak with you." Elena quickly gathered the documents, shoving them back into the jewelry box before opening the door. Liam stood in the hallway, fully dressed despite the late hour, his expression grim. "What is it?" Elena asked, though she was afraid she already knew. "I just got a call from the security company. Someone tried to breach the perimeter sensors about 10 minutes ago. They triggered the alarm on the east side of the property, near the old servants' entrance." Elena felt the walls of the mansion pressing in around her. "Did you see anyone?" "By the time I got there, they were gone." "But Elena..." Liam hesitated, clearly debating how much to tell her. Someone had tried to jimmy the lock on that door. This wasn't a photographer looking for pictures. This was someone trying to get inside. Elena's knees went weak. Leo's fine. I checked on him first thing. He's sleeping soundly, and I've activated all the interior motion sensors. No one can move through this house without us knowing about it. Elena wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the warm summer night. This isn't random, is it? Someone knows I'm here, knows I've found something? Liam stepped closer, his expression concerned. Found something? Elena, what are you talking about? For a moment, Elena considered maintaining the pretense that everything was normal, that she was just a grieving daughter returning to her childhood home. But the evidence burning in her hands and the fear clawing at her chest made that impossible. My mother didn't die in an accident, she said quietly. She was murdered, and I think I know who did it. The words hung between them in the hallway, heavy with implication and danger. Liam's expression didn't change, but Elena saw his posture shift slightly, becoming more alert, more protective. Tell me, he said simply. Elena led him into her mother's room, closing the door behind them before pulling out the jewelry box and its hidden contents. Liam listened without interruption as she explained about the journal, the photographs, and the devastating evidence of betrayal that reached to the heart of her family's business. When she finished, Liam was quiet for a long moment, studying the documents with the careful attention of someone trained to spot patterns and threats. "This Victoria Blackwood," he said finally. "How long has she been on your board?" "About 5 years. She came highly recommended with an impressive background in corporate restructuring. I trusted her completely." Elena's voice was bitter with self-recrimination. "She's been to my home, met Leo. I've confided in her about the challenges of being a single mother and running a company. And Marcus Thorne, where is he now?" "I have no idea. After my father fired him, he seemed to disappear from Millbrook Hills entirely. I assumed he'd moved on, started over somewhere else." Liam was studying one of the photographs with a magnifying glass. Eleanor hadn't noticed him pull from his pocket. "This was taken at the Millbrook Country Club based on the background, and the date stamp suggests it was about a week before your mother's death." The implications sent a chill through Elena. They were planning something. "My mother figured it out, and they killed her for it." "We don't know that for certain," Liam said carefully, "but we need to assume you're in danger. If they killed your mother to protect their secret, they won't hesitate to eliminate you now that you've discovered the evidence." Elena thought about Leo sleeping peacefully down the hall, unaware that his world might be about to shatter all over again. What do we do? "First, we secure this evidence. I know someone, a private investigator who specializes in corporate fraud. She's discreet and thorough. We get copies of everything to her, and we keep the originals somewhere safe." "And then?" Liam's expression was grim but determined. "Then we catch them. But Elena, you have to understand, if we're right about this, if they really killed your mother, then they're not going to stop until they've eliminated the threat you represent." Elena felt fear and determination warring in her chest. For 3 years, she'd lived with the guilt of her mother's death, convinced that if she'd been a better daughter, if she hadn't left angry after their last fight, maybe she could have prevented the tragedy. Now she knew the truth was far worse and far more dangerous. "I won't let them win," she said quietly. "I won't let them destroy my family's legacy or put Leo at risk. Whatever it takes, I'm going to see them brought to justice." Liam nodded, something that might have been admiration flickering in his eyes. "Then we do this together. But we do it smart, and we do it safely. Your mother was brave, but she tried to handle this alone. We're not making that mistake." The next morning dawned grey and overcast, with the kind of oppressive humidity that made the air feel thick and threatening. Elena woke to find Leo already dressed and bouncing with excitement about spending the day helping the gardeners plant new flower beds. "Can I, Mommy? Please?" "Mr. Rodriguez said he'll teach me about which flowers attract butterflies and which ones smell the best." Elena wanted to keep Leo close, to wrap him in cotton wool and never let him out of her sight until the people who'd threatened their family were safely behind bars. But she also knew that living in fear was no way to raise a child. "You can help in the garden," she said carefully, "but you stay where I can see you from the house, and if Mr. Carter or I call for you, you come inside immediately. No questions, no arguments." Leo nodded eagerly, already heading for the door. "I promise, Mommy. Can I take my camera? I want to take pictures of the flowers for my scrapbook." "Of course, sweetheart." As Leo raced outside, Elena felt the familiar mixture of love and terror that had become her constant companion since becoming a mother. How did other parents manage it, this constant awareness that the world was full of dangers they couldn't control? "He'll be safe," Liam's voice said from behind her. "I've got 2 additional security guards arriving this morning, and I'll personally maintain visual contact with Leo whenever he's outside." Elena turned to find Liam standing in the kitchen doorway, looking like he hadn't slept much either. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his usually perfect posture showed signs of the tension they were both carrying. "I called my contact last night," he continued, "Sarah Martinez. She's the private investigator I mentioned. She's driving up from the city this afternoon to review the evidence." "Good." Elena poured herself coffee, with hands that only shook slightly. "I've been thinking about Victoria Blackwood. If she's really involved in this conspiracy, then she knows I'm here. She's been calling my office, wanting to discuss some urgent business matters that require my immediate attention." "What kind of business matters?" "She claims there's a hostile takeover attempt brewing, that I need to return to New York immediately to deal with it." Elena's laugh was bitter. "Now I'm wondering if the takeover attempt is coming from inside the company." Liam frowned. "That would be bold, trying to force you back to New York when you've just discovered evidence of their involvement in your mother's death." "Unless they don't know I've discovered it. Maybe they think they can manipulate me, convince me to sign over control of the company to protect it from this supposed external threat. Or maybe they want you in New York because it's easier to arrange an accident in the city than in a small town where everyone knows everyone." The casual way Liam discussed the possibility of her murder should have been shocking, but Elena found his matter-of-fact approach oddly comforting. At least one person was taking the threat seriously. "I need to call Victoria back," Elena said. "If I seem too suspicious, she might accelerate whatever timeline they're working on." "Absolutely not." Liam's response was immediate and firm. "You're not talking to her without backup, and you're not giving her any information about your plans or your location. She already knows my location. She knows I'm here. But she doesn't know what you know. Let's keep it that way until we have a plan." Elena was about to argue when her phone rang. The display showed Victoria Blackwood's number, and Elena felt her stomach clench. "Speak of the devil," she murmured, then looked at Liam. "I have to answer. If I don't, she'll know something's wrong." Liam nodded grimly. "Put it on speaker. I want to hear what she says." Elena took a deep breath and accepted the call. "Victoria, good morning." "Elena, darling, thank God I reached you." Victoria's voice was warm and concerned, exactly as Elena remembered. "I've been trying to reach you for days. We have a serious situation developing." "What kind of situation?" "I'd rather not discuss it over the phone." "Can you come back to New York? We need to have an emergency board meeting, and there are documents you need to sign immediately." Elena exchanged glances with Liam, who was listening intently. "I'm afraid that's not possible right now. Leo is just settling in here, and, Elena, I understand that you're dealing with personal matters, but the company is at stake. If you don't act quickly, you could lose everything your family built." The urgency in Victoria's voice sounded genuine, but Elena now knew how skilled manipulators could be. "Can't we handle it remotely? Video conference calls? Electronic signatures? Some things require your physical presence. Elena, I'm telling you as your friend and business partner, you need to come back now." Friend, the word hit Elena like a slap. This woman who had shared meals with her family, who had listened to Elena's fears about raising Leo alone, who had offered comfort during Elena's darkest moments. If she really had killed Margaret, then every gesture of friendship had been a lie. "I'll think about it," Eleanor said carefully. "Let me make some arrangements for Leo, and I'll call you back." "Eleanor." "I said I'll call you back, Victoria." Eleanor ended the call and immediately felt like she might be sick. Liam was watching her with concern. "You did well," he said quietly. "You bought us time without seeming suspicious." She sounded so sincere. If I hadn't seen those photographs, I would have believed her completely. Elena wrapped her arms around herself. "How long do you think we have before she realizes I'm not coming back to New York willingly?" "Not long, which means we need to move fast." The sound of Leo's laughter drifting in from the garden provided a jarring contrast to their conversation. Eleanor moved to the window and watched her son crouched beside one of the flower beds, his camera capturing the beauty of newly planted roses while completely unaware of the danger swirling around him. "I won't let them hurt him," Eleanor said fiercely. "Whatever this costs, whatever I have to do, Leo stays safe." "He will," Liam assured her. "But Elena, you need to prepare yourself for the possibility that your life is about to change dramatically. If we're right about Victoria and Marcus, then exposing them is going to destroy everything you thought you knew about your business, your board of directors, maybe even your father's legacy." Eleanor thought about her father, the stern but loving man who had built Vance Industries from nothing, who had trusted Marcus Thorne as a partner and friend. How would he have felt knowing that his trust had been betrayed so completely? "My father always said that the truth was worth any price," Elena said quietly. "I guess we're about to find out if I inherited his courage along with his company." That afternoon, Sarah Martinez arrived at the estate in an unremarkable sedan that could have belonged to any suburban soccer mom. She was a small, energetic woman in her 40s, with sharp eyes and an immediately reassuring presence. "Liam's told me the basics," she said, as they settled in Elena's study, "but I need to hear everything from the beginning." For the next 2 hours, Elena recounted the story. Her mother's death, the discovery of the journal, the evidence hidden in the jewelry box, and the increasingly suspicious behavior of Victoria Blackwood. Sarah listened without interruption, occasionally making notes or asking for clarification. "This is substantial," Sarah said finally, photographing each piece of evidence with a high-resolution camera. "But we need more before we can go to the authorities. Corporate conspiracy cases are notoriously difficult to prosecute, especially when one of the alleged perpetrators is dead and the other has had years to cover her tracks." "What do you need?" Elena asked. "Financial records, primarily. If Victoria has been siphoning money from Vance Industries or manipulating stock prices, there will be a paper trail. Also, I want to track down Marcus Thorne. If he's still alive, and if we can prove he was involved in your mother's death, he might be willing to testify against Victoria in exchange for a plea deal. And if he's not willing to testify?" Sarah's smile was sharp. "Then we get creative. But first, I need access to your company's financial records, the real ones, not just what Victoria has been showing you." Eleanor felt a flutter of uncertainty. "Those records are confidential, protected by multiple layers of security and legal privilege. Which is why we're going to have to be very careful about how we obtain them," Sarah said. Liam mentioned that you still have full access to your corporate systems. Of course, I'm the CEO. Good. Then you're not technically stealing anything. You're reviewing your own company's records. But Eleanor, once we start pulling at these threads, there's no going back. Victoria will know we're investigating, and if she really is capable of murder, she'll try to silence us, Elena finished. I understand the risks. What Elena didn't say was that she was terrified, not just for herself, but for Leo, for Liam, for anyone who might be caught in the crossfire of a battle she was only beginning to understand. But the alternative, living in ignorance while her mother's killers profited from their crime, was unthinkable. That evening, after Leo had been tucked into bed with extra bedtime stories and triple-checked locks on his bedroom door, Elena sat in her study with her laptop, accessing Vance Industries' financial systems for the first time since arriving in Millbrook Hills. What she found made her sick. For the past 3 years, since just after her mother's death, Victoria had been authorizing payments to a series of shell companies that existed only on paper. The amounts were relatively small individually, hidden among legitimate business expenses, but collectively, they added up to nearly $2 million. More damning still were the stock transactions. Victoria had been systematically short-selling Vance Industries stock while spreading rumors about the company's financial instability. Every dip in stock price that had caused Elena sleepless nights had actually profited Victoria handsomely. She's been bleeding us dry, Elena whispered to Liam, who was reading over her shoulder, and positioning herself to buy controlling interest in the company at a fraction of its real value. It's a long-term plan, Liam agreed. She couldn't move too quickly or too obviously, so she's been patient, chipping away at the company's value while positioning herself as the savior who can rescue it. Eleanor's phone buzzed with another call from Victoria, the 5th one that day. This time, Elena didn't answer. She's getting desperate, Elena observed. The calls are becoming more frequent. Which means we're running out of time, Liam said grimly. Sarah found an address for Marcus Thorne. He's been living in Florida under an assumed name. She's flying down tomorrow to try to make contact. And if he refuses to cooperate, then we go with what we have and hope it's enough. Eleanor saved the financial files to an encrypted drive, her hands shaking slightly as she contemplated the magnitude of what they'd discovered. Victoria hadn't just betrayed the company. She'd destroyed lives, stolen dreams, and murdered an innocent woman to cover her tracks. I keep thinking about my mother, Elena said quietly. She must have been so frightened in those last weeks, knowing someone was planning to hurt the family, but not knowing who to trust. Liam moved to stand behind Elena's chair, his hands settling gently on her shoulders. The touch was meant to be comforting, but it sent an unexpected warmth through Elena's body that had nothing to do with the dangerous situation they were facing. She was brave, Liam said. She gathered evidence, she tried to protect you, and now you're finishing what she started. Eleanor leaned back against Liam's solid presence, allowing herself a moment of weakness. I'm terrified, Liam. Not just of Victoria and what she might do, but of what comes after. If we expose this conspiracy, it's going to destroy everything I thought I knew about my life. Maybe, Liam agreed, but you'll rebuild something better, something true. Elena turned in her chair to look at him, struck by the quiet certainty in his voice. How can you be so sure? Because I've watched you these past few weeks. I've seen how you are with Leo, how you're learning to be the mother he needs instead of the mother you thought you should be. I've seen you face hard truths about your family and your business without flinching. That takes real strength, Elena. The use of her first name, combined with the warmth in his eyes, made Elena's heart skip. Somewhere along the way, Liam had stopped being just her employee and had become something else, a partner, a confidant, maybe something even more significant. Liam, she began, not sure what she wanted to say, but knowing she needed to acknowledge the shift between them. He seemed to understand, his hands tightening slightly on her shoulders. "I know this isn't the time," he said quietly. "With everything that's happening, the last thing you need is complications." "Maybe complications are exactly what I need," Elena heard herself say. "Maybe I've spent so much time trying to control everything that I've forgotten how to just feel." The air between them was charged with possibility and danger and the kind of raw honesty that came from facing mortality together. Elena found herself rising from her chair, closing the distance between them until she could see the flecks of gold in his grey eyes. "Elena," Liam said, his voice rough, "if we do this, if we cross this line, there's no going back to the way things were." "Good," Elena whispered, and then she kissed him. The kiss was everything Elena hadn't known she was hungry for, gentle but passionate, respectful but urgent, the kind of connection that made the dangerous world outside fade away for just a moment. Liam's arms came around her, solid and protective, and Elena felt safer than she had in years. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard, and Elena could see her own wonder and confusion reflected in Liam's expression. "I wasn't expecting this," Elena admitted. "Neither was I. But Elena, you need to know, I'm not going anywhere. Whatever happens with Victoria and the investigation, whatever danger we're facing, we face it together." Before Elena could respond, a loud crash from somewhere outside made them both freeze. Liam was instantly alert, his protective instincts overriding everything else. "Stay here," he ordered, moving toward the window. "Keep the lights off." Elena's heart was hammering as Liam peered through the curtains, his body tense and ready for action. After what felt like an eternity, he relaxed slightly. "Looks like a tree branch came down in the wind," he said, "but I'm going to do a full perimeter check anyway." As Liam headed for the door, Elena caught his arm. "Be careful," she said, and the words carried the weight of everything she couldn't yet say. "Always am," he assured her, pressing a quick kiss to her forehead. "Lock this door behind me, and don't open it for anyone but me." After Liam left, Elena sat alone in the darkened study, her lips still tingling from their kiss, and her mind reeling from everything that had changed in the space of a few minutes. Outside, the wind was picking up, rattling the windows and making the old house creak and settle around her. Elena thought about her mother, alone in this same house 3 years ago, sensing danger but not knowing where it would come from. The parallel was unsettling, but this time, Elena wasn't facing the threat alone. She had Liam, she had Sarah, and she had evidence that could bring her mother's killers to justice. Her phone buzzed again. Victoria making her 6th call of the day. This time Elena decided to answer. "Victoria." "Elena, thank God. We need to talk immediately. Something has happened, something that changes everything." Elena's grip tightened on the phone. "What are you talking about?" "I can't discuss it over the phone. You need to come back to New York tonight. I'm sending the corporate jet to pick you up." "Victoria, I told you." "Elena, listen to me very carefully. Your company is under attack. Your personal accounts have been frozen, and there are federal investigators asking questions about irregularities in your financial records. If you don't get back here immediately, you're going to lose everything." The words hit Elena like ice water. Either Victoria was an even better actress than Elena had thought, or something genuinely catastrophic was happening. "What kind of irregularities?" Elena asked carefully. "The kind that suggest massive embezzlement and securities fraud. Elena, someone has been systematically looting Vance Industries, and all the evidence points to you." Elena felt the world tilt sideways. "That's impossible." "I know it's impossible, which is why you need to get back here and clear this up." "Elena, I'm trying to protect you, but my hands are tied if you won't cooperate. Who's making these accusations?" I can't say over the phone. Just, please, trust me. Let me help you." Elena ended the call with shaking hands, her mind racing through the implications. If Victoria was telling the truth, then Elena's investigation into the conspiracy had somehow backfired spectacularly. But if Victoria was lying, then this was exactly the kind of manipulation Elena should have expected. When Liam returned from his perimeter check, he found Eleanor staring at her phone with an expression of shock and confusion. "What is it?" he asked immediately. Eleanor repeated Victoria's claims, watching Liam's expression grow increasingly grim. "It's a setup," he said without hesitation. "Victoria knows we're onto her, so she's trying to flip the script, make you look like the criminal so no one will believe your accusations against her." "But what if she's telling the truth? What if someone really is framing me? Then we deal with it." "But Eleanor, think about this logically. Who would have the access and expertise to frame you for embezzling from your own company?" The answer was obvious, and it made Elena's stomach turn. Victoria. She's had access to all our financial systems, all our accounts. Exactly. This is damage control. She's trying to force you back to New York where she can control the narrative. Elena's phone rang again. Not Victoria this time, but her assistant Patricia calling from New York. "Mrs. Vance, thank God I reached you. There are FBI agents in your office, and they have a warrant to search your files. They're saying something about a major financial fraud investigation." Eleanor's knees went weak. "Patricia, I need you to listen very carefully. I want you to pack up your personal belongings and leave the building immediately. Don't talk to anyone, don't sign anything, and don't tell anyone where I am. But Mrs. Vance, they're asking about you specifically. They want to know your whereabouts. Tell them you don't know. Patricia, I'm going to be cleared of whatever they're investigating, but right now I need you to trust me and protect yourself." After Elena hung up, she looked at Liam with growing panic. "It's really happening. Victoria's really trying to destroy me." "Then we destroy her first," Liam said grimly. "How long before Sarah gets back from Florida?" "She said she'd call by tomorrow morning. That might be too late. If Victoria's moved this aggressively, she's not going to wait for us to build our case." Elena felt the walls closing in around her, but underneath the fear was a growing anger. Victoria had killed her mother, stolen from her company, and now was trying to frame Elena for crimes she hadn't committed. Enough was enough. "What do you suggest?" Elena asked. "We force her hand. Make her come to us instead of trying to lure you back to New York." "How?" Liam's smile was sharp and dangerous. "We let her think she's won. Tell her you're ready to cooperate, that you need her help. Invite her here to Millbrook Hills for a private meeting to discuss your options." Elena felt a chill of fear, mixed with anticipation. "You want to confront her directly. I want to record her confessing to everything. Get her talking about your mother, about the financial manipulation, about the frame job. With the right pressure, people like Victoria can't resist explaining how clever they've been. And if she doesn't confess? Then we're no worse off than we are now. But Elena, if we're going to do this, we need to do it right. One chance, with everything recorded and documented, and enough security backup to make sure no one gets hurt." Elena thought about Leo sleeping upstairs, blissfully unaware that his mother was planning to face down a killer. She thought about her mother, brave, but ultimately alone when she'd tried to stop this same conspiracy. And she thought about Liam, this strong, careful man who was offering to put himself in danger to protect her family. "Okay," she said finally. "Let's do it." The next morning, Elena placed the call that would either end the nightmare or escalate it beyond imagining. "Victoria, it's Elena. I've been thinking about everything you said, and you're right. I need to come back to New York and deal with this situation." "Elena, thank God you're being reasonable. When can you leave?" "That's just it. I can't leave right now. Leo's having some behavioral issues, and I can't drag him back to the city in the middle of a federal investigation, but I was hoping. Could you come here, just for a day or two, so we can strategize without involving Leo in the chaos?" There was a pause, and Elena could practically hear Victoria calculating. "I suppose I could arrange that," Victoria said finally. "When were you thinking?" "As soon as possible. Tomorrow, if you can manage it." "I'll clear my schedule. Elena, I want you to know, we're going to get through this. I won't let them destroy what your family built." The false concern in Victoria's voice made Elena's skin crawl, but she forced herself to sound grateful. "Thank you, Victoria. I don't know what I'd do without you." After ending the call, Elena felt like she might be sick. Every word had been a lie, every gesture of friendship a manipulation. But now they had less than 24 hours to prepare for what might be the most dangerous conversation of Elena's life. Liam spent the morning coordinating with Sarah, who had returned from Florida with disturbing news. Marcus Thorne was indeed alive, living under the name Michael Torres in a modest retirement community outside Tampa. But when Sarah had approached him, he'd panicked, claiming he'd been paid to stay quiet and that some secrets were worth more than his life. "He's terrified," Sarah reported via video call. "But I think he can be convinced to testify if we can guarantee his protection. The problem is, he's convinced that Victoria has connections powerful enough to reach him anywhere." "What kind of connections?" Elena asked. "He wouldn't say specifically, but he kept mentioning the senator and people in Washington. It's possible this conspiracy reaches higher than we thought." Elena felt a chill. If Victoria had political connections, then exposing her might be even more dangerous than they'd anticipated. "We stick with the plan," Liam said firmly. "Get Victoria talking, record everything, and worry about the political implications later." The rest of the day was spent in preparation. Liam installed hidden cameras and microphones throughout the study and living room, ensuring that every angle would be covered. He also arranged for backup. 2 former military colleagues would be positioned around the property, close enough to intervene if things went wrong, but far enough away to avoid detection. Elena spent the afternoon trying to act normal for Leo's sake, helping him with his flower photographs and listening to his excited chatter about the butterfly garden they were planning. But her mind was constantly on the next day's confrontation and all the ways it could go catastrophically wrong. That evening, after Leo was asleep, Eleanor and Liam sat in the conservatory, going over the plan one final time. The familiar space felt different now, charged with tension and the memory of their kiss the night before. "Remember," Liam said, "your goal is to get her talking about your mother's death and the financial manipulation. Don't push too hard. Don't seem too knowledgeable. Let her think she's in control." Elena nodded, though her stomach was churning with nerves. What if she suspects something? What if she realizes it's a trap? "Then we improvise. But Elena, if at any point you feel unsafe, if she becomes threatening or violent, you get out of there. Don't try to be a hero." "I won't," Elena promised. "But Liam, what if this doesn't work? What if we can't get enough evidence to clear my name?" Liam reached over and took her hands in his touch warm and steadying. "Then we disappear. You and Leo, new identities, new lives. I have contacts who can make that happen." The casual way he included himself in their theoretical escape plan made Elena's heart skip. "You'd do that? Give up your life here, your daughter?" "Sophie would be safer if I'm not around to draw danger to her," Liam said quietly. "And as for my life here, Elena, what I have here isn't really living. It's just existing. What we've started to build together, what I see when I watch you with Leo, when I see you finding your strength, that's worth fighting for." Elena felt tears prick at her eyes. I'm scared, Liam. Not just of Victoria, but of what comes after. If we survive this, if we clear my name and expose the conspiracy, where does that leave us? It leaves us free to find out, Liam said, lifting their joined hands to press a kiss to her knuckles. Elena, I know this isn't how either of us planned to fall in love, in the middle of danger and deception, but I'm not sorry it happened. Elena's breath caught. Neither of them had used the word love before, but hearing it now felt both terrifying and exactly right. I love you too, she whispered, which is why you need to promise me something. If this goes wrong tomorrow, if Victoria tries to hurt Leo or me, you get him to safety. You don't try to save me if it means risking him. Elena, promise me, Liam. Leo is the most important thing in the world. He's all that matters. Liam was quiet for a long moment, conflict clear in his expression. I promise I'll keep Leo safe, he said finally. But I'm not promising to sacrifice you for him. We all get out of this alive, or we find another way. Before Elena could argue, Liam kissed her, deep and desperate, and full of all the things they might not get the chance to say tomorrow. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard, and Elena felt like her heart might burst with the intensity of what she felt for this strong, honorable man who'd walked into her life when she needed him most. Whatever happens tomorrow, she said softly, I want you to know that these past few weeks, falling in love with you and watching you with Leo, it's been the happiest I've been since David died. Then we make sure there are many more weeks like it, Liam said firmly. Victoria Blackwood has taken enough from your family. She's not taking our future too. The next morning dawned bright and clear, with the kind of crisp autumn air that should have felt promising instead of ominous. Elena dressed carefully in a business suit that projected competence and vulnerability in equal measure. She needed to seem strong enough to be worth Victoria's continued manipulation, but weak enough not to be seen as a threat. Leo was spending the day at the local elementary school, getting acquainted with his new classmates and teachers. Elena had hated sending him away, but she couldn't risk having him anywhere near the house during Victoria's visit. She's here, Liam said quietly, watching from the study window as a black sedan pulled into the circular drive. Elena took a deep breath, checking her appearance one last time in the hall mirror. The woman looking back at her bore little resemblance to the grieving, guilt-ridden person who'd arrived in Millbrook Hills just weeks ago. Her eyes were clearer, her posture stronger, and there was a determined set to her jaw that spoke of someone ready to fight for what mattered. Victoria Blackwood emerged from the sedan, looking every inch the successful businesswoman. Tailored suit, perfect hair, and the kind of confident smile that had once made Eleanor feel grateful to have such a competent ally. Now, knowing what she knew, Elena could see the calculation behind that smile, the cold ambition that had driven Victoria to murder. Elena, darling, Victoria said as Elena opened the front door, you look wonderful. Country life seems to agree with you. It's been an adjustment, Elena replied carefully, accepting Victoria's air kisses while fighting the urge to recoil from the contact. Thank you so much for coming. I feel like I'm drowning in all of this. That's why I'm here, Victoria said soothingly, to help you navigate through this crisis. Elena led Victoria into the living room, where coffee and pastries had been arranged on the antique side table. Everything looked natural, welcoming. There was no sign of the hidden cameras or the tension coiling in Elena's chest. Tell me exactly what's happening with the FBI investigation, Elena said once they were settled. I've been so isolated here, I don't understand how things got so out of hand so quickly. Victoria's expression became grave, concerned, the perfect mask of a loyal friend delivering difficult news. It's serious, Elena. Someone has been systematically embezzling from Vance Industries for years, using your access codes and authorization. The amounts are substantial. We're talking about millions of dollars. But that's impossible. I would have noticed irregularities in our financial reports. The embezzlement was sophisticated, hidden among legitimate business expenses and disguised as consulting fees and equipment purchases. Whoever did this knew our systems intimately. Eleanor felt a flutter of admiration for Victoria's performance. If she didn't know better, she'd be completely convinced by the woman's sincerity. "Do the investigators have any suspects?" Eleanor asked. Victoria hesitated, as if reluctant to share bad news. "Eleanor, I'm afraid the evidence all points to you. The transactions were authorized with your codes, signed with your electronic signature, and the money was transferred to accounts that appear to be under your control." What accounts? I don't have any accounts I haven't told you about." "That's what I told the investigators, but they have records showing accounts in the Cayman Islands and Switzerland, all linked to your social security number and personal information." Elena let her voice shake slightly, as if she were truly frightened and confused. "Victoria, I swear to you, I have no knowledge of any offshore accounts. Someone must have stolen my identity, used my information to set up these accounts." "I believe you," Victoria said earnestly, reaching over to squeeze Elena's hand, "which is why I'm here. We need to figure out who could have had access to your personal information and your business authorization codes." It was a masterful performance, Elena had to admit. Victoria was simultaneously positioning herself as Elena's savior while building the case for Elena's guilt. The false sympathy in her voice was particularly galling. "Who would have that kind of access?" Elena asked, playing her part. "It would have to be someone with intimate knowledge of our computer systems, someone who's worked closely with you for years, someone you trusted completely." Elena let the implication hang in the air for a moment, as if she were considering the possibilities. "Most of our senior staff have been with the company for decades. I can't imagine any of them would betray me like this. Sometimes people we trust the most are the ones who hurt us," Victoria said softly. "Elena, I hate to ask this, but I need you to think back. Has anyone been acting strangely lately? Anyone who might have seemed resentful or bitter?" Elena pretended to think, then shook her head. "I've been so focused on Leo and dealing with grief that I haven't been paying attention to office dynamics the way I should have been." "That's understandable. Losing your mother so soon after David's death, it would be natural for you to withdraw from business matters." The mention of her mother made Elena's pulse quicken, but she forced herself to remain calm. This was the opening she needed. "I still blame myself for Mother's death," Eleanor said quietly. "If I hadn't left that night, if I'd stayed to work things out." "Eleanor, your mother's death was a tragic accident. You can't blame yourself for that." "Can't I? We had such a terrible fight that last night. She was trying to tell me something about the business, about someone she didn't trust. But I was so angry about her interference that I didn't listen." Eleanor watched Victoria's face carefully, looking for any sign of reaction. For just a moment, something flickered in Victoria's eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or concern. "Your mother mentioned someone she didn't trust?" Victoria asked, her tone carefully neutral. "She kept talking about someone who was asking too many questions about our financial records. Someone who was spending time in my father's old office when they thought no one was looking. But I thought she was just being paranoid. You know how she could be about protecting the family business." Victoria was quiet for a moment, clearly processing this information. "Did she say who it was?" Eleanor shook her head. "That's what she was trying to tell me when we fought. She wanted me to promise to investigate, to look into some concerns she had. But I accused her of trying to control my life from beyond the grave, of not trusting my judgment about the people I worked with." "Elena, you couldn't have known." "But what if she was right?" Elena interrupted, letting genuine emotion creep into her voice. "What if someone was planning this even then? What if the same person who's framing me now was stealing from us 3 years ago and my mother figured it out?" Victoria's composure slipped slightly, just for a moment. That's a very serious accusation, Elena. You're suggesting that your mother's death wasn't an accident. I don't know what I'm suggesting, Elena said, pressing forward. But doesn't it seem like too much of a coincidence? My mother dies mysteriously after expressing concerns about someone stealing from the company, and now 3 years later, I'm being framed for massive embezzlement. Elena, you're upset and looking for connections that may not exist. Your mother drowned in the swimming pool. There was no evidence of foul play. Because no one looked for evidence of foul play. Everyone just assumed it was an accident because that's what the killer wanted them to think. Victoria stood abruptly, moving to the window that overlooked the pool area. Eleanor could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands clenched and unclenched at her sides. You're talking about murder, Elena. That's a very dangerous accusation to make without proof. You're right, Elena said, standing as well. I shouldn't be making wild accusations. But Victoria, what if I told you I found something? What if my mother left evidence? Victoria turned slowly, and Elena saw something in her expression that hadn't been there before. Something cold and calculating that made her blood run cold. What kind of evidence? Victoria asked quietly. Elena felt like she was walking a tightrope over a pit of snakes, but she pressed forward. A journal, hidden in her room. She documented everything, meetings, conversations, financial irregularities she'd noticed. And what did this journal say? That she'd figured out who was stealing from us. That she had proof of a conspiracy involving someone on the board of directors and a former business partner of my father's. Victoria was very still now, her mask of friendship completely gone. Elena, if such evidence existed, why didn't you mention it when your mother died? Because I never found it then. I only discovered it last week when I was going through her things. Victoria, the journal mentions you. The words hung in the air between them like a loaded gun. Victoria's face went through a series of expressions, surprise, calculation, and finally, something that looked almost like relief. What does it say about me? Victoria asked, her voice dangerously quiet. Elena took a deep breath, knowing she was about to cross a line she couldn't uncross. It says you were meeting with Marcus Thorne, that you were planning to take over the company after they eliminated my mother. Victoria was silent for a long moment, and Eleanor could practically see her weighing her options. When she finally spoke, her voice was completely different, colder, more controlled, stripped of any pretense of friendship. That's a very interesting story, Elena. I'm curious. Where is this supposed journal now? Somewhere safe. Somewhere you'll never find it. Victoria smiled, and it was like watching a snake bare its fangs. Elena, you always were too trusting, too naive. Did you really think you could just waltz back here and play detective without consequences? I think my mother was murdered, and I think you killed her. Your mother was a meddling old woman who couldn't mind her own business, Victoria said flatly. She should have accepted the generous retirement package Marcus offered her and stayed out of company affairs. Elena felt her heart racing. Victoria was actually confessing, but the cold fury in her voice was terrifying. So you admit you killed her? I admit that Margaret Vance's death was convenient for my plans. As for how she died, let's just say that accidents happen when people swim alone at night in poorly lit pools. The casual way Victoria discussed her mother's murder made Elena's stomach turn, but she forced herself to keep pushing. And Marcus? Where is he now? Marcus has outlived his usefulness. He's being well compensated to keep quiet about his role in our business arrangement, but he's no longer a factor in my plans. Your plans to frame me for embezzlement? Victoria laughed, a sound completely devoid of warmth. Elena, you've been so easy to manipulate. Every time I suggested a new investment strategy or recommended a business contact, you went along with it without question. Building the case against you has been almost boringly simple. The offshore accounts, the electronic signatures, all of it was you. All of it was you as far as the FBI is concerned. You've been under so much stress since your husband died, making increasingly erratic financial decisions. It's tragic, really, a young widow overwhelmed by running a major corporation, gradually succumbing to the temptation of easy money. Elena felt sick listening to Victoria construct the narrative that would destroy her life. And Leo? What happens to him when I'm in prison? Victoria's smile turned predatory. Don't worry about Leo. I'm sure suitable arrangements can be made for his care. Perhaps a nice boarding school, somewhere far from all this unpleasantness. The threat to her son sent a surge of fury through Elena that was almost overwhelming. You'll never touch my son. Eleanor, you really don't understand your position, do you? You invited me here to have this conversation, but you're not in control of how it ends. There are no cameras recording this, no witnesses to what I've said, and if you try to repeat our conversation, well, who's going to believe the desperate lies of a woman facing federal fraud charges? Victoria moved closer, and Elena could see the complete absence of humanity in her eyes. This woman had killed once, and was clearly prepared to kill again. The beauty of my plan, Victoria continued, is that I never have to get my hands dirty again. You're going to have a tragic accident, just like your mother. Overcome with guilt and facing prison, you'll take your own life rather than drag your family name through the mud. Very noble, very understandable. And you think you'll get away with it? I know I will. I've been planning this for years, Elena. Every detail, every contingency. By the time your body is found, I'll be back in New York, devastated by the loss of my dear friend and prepared to shepherd Leo through this difficult time. Eleanor felt trapped, cornered by a predator who had planned every detail of her destruction, but she also felt a fierce determination not to let this woman win, not to let her mother's death go unavenged. There's just one problem with your plan, Victoria, Elena said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. And what's that? I never said there were no witnesses. Victoria's confident expression faltered slightly. What are you talking about? Elena smiled for the first time since Victoria had arrived. I'm talking about the fact that this entire conversation has been recorded. I'm talking about the FBI agents who've been listening to every word you've said. And I'm talking about the fact that Marcus Thorne decided he'd rather testify than spend the rest of his life looking over his shoulder. The color drained from Victoria's face. You're bluffing. Am I? Then why don't you turn around and see who's standing behind you? Victoria spun toward the living room entrance, where Liam stood with 3 FBI agents, all wearing expressions of grim satisfaction. Victoria's mask of composure finally cracked completely, her face contorting with rage and panic. You stupid, naive little girl, she snarled at Elena. Do you have any idea what you've done? The people I work with don't accept failure. They'll come for you, for Leo, for everyone you care about. Not from federal prison, they won't, Agent Sarah Chen said as she moved forward with handcuffs. Victoria Blackwood, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, securities fraud, and accessory to the murder of Margaret Vance. As the agents read Victoria her rights, Elena felt her knees go weak with relief and residual fear. Liam was beside her instantly, his arms strong and reassuring around her shoulders. It's over, he murmured against her hair. You did it. You got justice for your mother. Elena leaned into his strength, watching as the woman who had destroyed so much of her life was led away in handcuffs. Victoria looked back once, her eyes filled with such hatred that Elena shivered despite Liam's protective embrace. It's not over, Victoria called out as the agents guided her toward the door. You have no idea how deep this goes, how many people you've made enemies of. This is just the beginning. The threat hung in the air even after Victoria was gone, and Elena felt Liam's arms tighten around her protectively. She's just trying to scare you, Agent Chen said, though her expression was troubled. We'll make sure you and Leo have protection until we're certain there are no other threats. As the FBI cars disappeared down the driveway, Eleanor finally allowed herself to believe that the nightmare was really over. Victoria was in custody. Marcus would testify in exchange for a reduced sentence, and the evidence they'd gathered would ensure that justice was finally served for her mother's murder. "What happens now?" Eleanor asked, still leaning against Liam's solid presence. "Now we rebuild," Liam said simply. "Your company, your life, your family." Elena looked up at him, this man who had risked everything to help her find the truth and protect her son. "Our family." Liam's smile was answer enough, but he put it into words anyway. "If you'll have me, if Leo will have me." Before Elena could answer, the sound of a car in the driveway announced Leo's return from school. Elena quickly composed herself, not wanting her son to see any trace of the fear and danger that had just filled their home. Leo burst through the front door with his usual boundless energy, chattering excitedly about his new teacher and the art project they'd started. But he stopped short when he saw Elena and Liam standing close together in the living room, their body language clearly indicating something significant had happened. "Is everything okay, Mummy?" Leo asked, with the intuitive sensitivity that never failed to amaze Elena. Elena knelt down to Leo's level, taking his small hands in hers. "Everything is very okay, sweetheart. Better than okay. We're safe, and we're going to be happy here." Leo looked between Elena and Liam with the perceptive gaze of a child who'd learned to read adult emotions for survival. "Are you and Mr. Liam, are you going to be like a family?" Elena felt her heart swell with love for this brave, intuitive little boy who'd endured so much loss and change with such grace. "Would you like that?" Leo nodded enthusiastically, then launched himself at Liam with the trust and affection that had been building between them since their first meeting. Liam caught him easily, lifting him up as if he weighed nothing, and Elena saw tears in Liam's eyes as Leo hugged him tight. "Does this mean Sophie can be my sister?" Leo asked, with the straightforward logic of childhood. "If she'd like that," Liam said, his voice rough with emotion, "and if her mum thinks it's a good idea for us all to spend more time together." As Elena watched the two most important males in her life embrace, she felt a peace settle over her that she hadn't experienced in years. The house that had once felt haunted by tragedy and regret now felt filled with possibility and love. That evening, after Leo had gone to bed with promises of a proper celebration the next day, Elena and Liam walked hand in hand through the gardens that had been her mother's pride and joy. The roses were blooming again, their scent heavy in the warm air, and Eleanor could almost feel her mother's approval surrounding them. "I keep thinking about something Victoria said," Eleanor confided, as they settled on the bench beside the fountain. "About how she taught me to trust her so completely that I never questioned her advice." "What about it?" "I did the same thing with Leo, didn't I? I was so focused on providing for him financially that I never questioned whether I was giving him what he actually needed." Liam was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "I think you were doing the best you could with the tools you had. But Elena, you're not the same person you were when you arrived here. Leo's not the same either. You've both grown." Elena thought about the woman who'd stepped out of the limousine just weeks ago, brittle, defensive, drowning in guilt and isolation. That woman felt like a stranger now. "I want to stay here," Elena said suddenly. "Not just for a few months, but permanently. I want Leo to grow up in this house, in this town, with the kind of stability and community I never gave him before." "What about Vance Industries?" "I can run it from here, or I can sell it and start something new. The company was my father's dream, but maybe it's time for me to figure out what my dreams are." Liam brought their joined hands to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "And what are your dreams, Elena Vance?" Elena looked around at the gardens her mother had loved, the house that had witnessed both tragedy and triumph, the man whose love had helped her find her strength. I dream of Leo growing up happy and secure, surrounded by people who love him. I dream of honoring my mother's memory by living the kind of life she always wanted for me, one filled with love and purpose and presence. And I dream of building something beautiful with you, whatever that looks like. I love the sound of those dreams, Liam said softly. I love you. I love you too, Elena replied, and the words felt like a promise, a commitment, a new beginning. As they sat together in the garden where Elena had once played as a child, where her mother had found peace and beauty, where she'd nearly lost everything, and instead found a love worth fighting for, Elena felt the last of her old walls crumble away. The fortress she'd built around her heart had been replaced by something far stronger, a foundation of trust, love, and the courage to be vulnerable. In the distance, she could hear Leo's gentle breathing through his open bedroom window, peaceful and secure. Closer still, she could feel Liam's steady heartbeat against her shoulder, strong and reassuring. And somewhere, in the way the moonlight fell across the roses her mother had planted, Elena felt a blessing, a benediction, a whispered encouragement to embrace the happiness she'd finally learned to accept. The Vance estate had always been a place of secrets, but now those secrets had been exposed to the light. What remained was truth, love, and the promise of tomorrow. A tomorrow where Elena would wake up not as a grieving widow or a guilty daughter or an overwhelmed CEO, but simply as a woman loved and loving in return. It had taken a conspiracy, a murder, and nearly losing everything for Elena to discover what truly mattered. But as she sat in her mother's garden, with her heart finally at peace, she knew that every moment of fear and pain had been worth it to arrive at this place of grace. The mansion behind them glowed with warm light, welcoming and alive again after years of standing empty. It was ready for new memories, new laughter, new love, and Elena Vance, daughter, mother, survivor, beloved, was ready to create them. We want to hear your opinion about this beautiful love story. Let us know what you thought of this plot full of emotions and surprises. Tell us your name, where you are watching from, and what score you would give this story from 0 to 10. A story that touched hearts. And if you enjoyed the storyline, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the amazing new stories coming up. See you next time.